Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us and for engaging in this discussion with us titled Space as Medium, Invisible City, part of the layered medium we are in Open Circuits exhibition. Firstly, I want to thank ADMAF for hosting this exhibition along with the Seoul Museum of Art and the Korean Cultural Center here in the UAE. I also would like to thank our two panelists joining us today, Minouk and Wael Awar here. I'll take a second to introduce our two panelists before we go into this conversation. But this conversation is going to be a very explorative discussion on space, how we treat it as a medium, and how we can unravel cities and urban spaces in a very intentional but also personal approach. So if I start with Minouk Lim is a Seoul-based artist whose multimedia practice spans video, installation, and performance. Her work investigates the emotional and political aftermath of Korea's rapid modernization, and she has exhibited internationally at places like the Centre Pompidou, the Walker Art Center, Gwangju Biennale, and her works are in collections such as the Guggenheim, Tate Modern, and MMCA Korea. Wael Awar here is an architect and the founding partner of Wael, an architectural studio based in Dubai and Tokyo. His practice explores how vernacular knowledge and environmental materials can be used to rethink sustainable architecture. He has presented at the Venice Architecture Biennale in 2021, winning the Golden Lion, and has participated in the Sharjah Architecture Triennial, Dubai Design Week, and recently the Abu Dhabi Public Art Biennale. So thank you both for joining us today. Minouk has a work here in the exhibition titled SOS, Adaptive Dissonance, and Wael is also contributing with an article to the publication that will accompany this exhibition. I will speak again just to introduce your video work here and Wael, your contribution a bit before we jump in. SOS Adaptive Dissonance is a 3-channel video work here. The Census, is a 3-channel video work documenting a live site-specific performance staged aboard a cruise ship on the Han River in Seoul. This vessel journeys through the city's urban core, passing key infrastructural landmarks, and it becomes a stage for a sequence of poetic and unsettling interventions, some protesters, 2 lovers, and mirror images across the skyline. Wael's contribution to this exhibition publication is a speculative and reflective text that reconsiders water as both material and metaphor in shaping urban life, tracing its roles from ancient civilizations to today's engineered Gulf cities. And his article explores the paradoxes of our contemporary infrastructures in relation to water. And I think my first question that I want to set the scene and just introduce you both conceptually to the audience is directly with the subject matter of space and how we treat space as a medium. And I want to ask you guys directly, maybe in one sentence or one paragraph or however long, how you think you treat space and why is it important to you to treat space as a medium? Whoever would like to answer first, of course.
First? Okay, I thought ladies first. Thank you, Salem, for the introduction. Thank you, ADMAF, for this great panel and the exhibition. First, to talk about space, I think it's important to define the word, right? What is space? And I'll talk about myself. I built my career practicing first in Japan. I think that has a tremendous impact on the way I think and perceive space. In Japan, the kanji for space is ku. And the meaning of ku is the in-between things. So it is not the physical built environment, but the space in between that is open to possibilities. So they see space as something that's transient, something that's lively, that's active. It's a platform that opens up possibilities. While maybe Western ideologies look at space as a container, or a physical object, but not the negative, or the negative of, or they see it as the negative between things. But the coup does not mean the negative. The coup is by itself the object itself, yeah? And I think that that's very important in the way, you know, I think about space. And then, you know, you see it as something that's living, that's material. So to me, when I design with space, I design space, I don't think of the architecture that will create the space. I think of the activity and the senses I want to create, or the experience, and then the architecture becomes one of the tools that helps create that, let's say, object. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's a little bit complicated to define.
Yeah, I always, when I hear the word space, I immediately think about synonyms, and I think about place, I think about space, I think about site, location, specificity. So it's hard to think about space as one obsolete subject, and rather this more complex medium. What about you, Minouk? How would you think you would define space, I guess, and then how do you treat space as a medium yourself?
먼저 먼저 이 자리에 초대해 주셔서 감사드리고요.
네. So she says, thank you so much for having me here today.
그리고 이런 지금 와엘이 시작한 그 번역의 문제가 저도 그 이야기를 시작할 수 있어서
네.
반갑습니다.
So she also says she's very familiar with what Wael has first introduced about what the word space means in terms of the Eastern context.
저에게는 말씀하셨듯이 공간, 장소, 그리고 사이트 이런 말들은 어떻게 보면 번역의 문제였고, 한 번도 우리가 스스로 생각해 본 적이 없는 번역어였다라는 것에서 제 작업의 또 기초가 거기서 시작하고 있다는 얘기를 하고 싶었습니다.
So the foundation of many of her works also start off with thinking about the word space, because she's also concerned about when it comes to understanding the term space, sometimes it has some translation concerns of what it means to be a space. For instance, it could be a location or site as we could perhaps think about, but in fact it could be something more abstract than we know.
그 공간이라는 그 한자를 번역을 하면서 사실은 그것이 굉장히 추상적으로 우리에게 다가왔고, 그리고 기술 진보와 관련해서 그것이 더더욱 어떤 그 맥락이나 관계를 제외한 채 우리가 생각을 했어야 했다라는 것이 저의 문제 의식의 출발이었다고 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
So the starting point of her critical thinking comes about translating the term space from Chinese, which actually means, as Wael has mentioned, between emptiness and between, which kind of forms the word space. And from here, she's also concerned about how technological progress concerns about her work throughout when we think about space, excluding the idea of location or site.
I think it's really interesting that both of you started from the point of view of a linguistic reading of the word itself before delving into the abstract conceptual idea of space, and having this sort of like archaeological reading of space. And I think what's also interesting for the both of you is water as a starting point as well. And how it presents itself in your work, Minouk, in the video work, but also Wael for you recently with the Barzakh Pavilion here in Abu Dhabi, being on the Abu Dhabi Coronation, then of course Minouk, your video being on the Han River. So I'm curious, this space is a very site-specific space, of course. So here the site is really driving a lot of the metaphoric or symbolic ideas of the videos. So I'm curious if you can share with us what that site plays a role in this work, and what does water ultimately play a role in this narrative?
네, 그 한강을 선택한 이유는 사실 이제 파리에서 이제 한 13년을 보내고 한국에 올 적마다 그 굉장히 빠르게 변한 도시의 모습을 이제 본 거고요.
네, so when she actually has lived in Paris for 13 years before moving to Korea, and through this whole journey after moving into Korea after 13 years, she has noticed a lot of small and big changes.
근데 이제 한국의 그 압축적 경제 성장을 항상 한국은 한강의 기적이라는 말로 비유를 했었거든요.
So many of the times when we think about the economic development of what's happening in Korea, many Koreans refer to that as miracle of Han River.
그래서 그 한강의 기적이라는 그 비유를 한강의 관점에서 도시를 바라보게 하고 싶었어요.
And regarding this metaphor of viewing the success of the miracle of Han River, she has tried to put her perspective towards about watching the city from the perspective of the Han River.
I think it's very interesting to see the Han River as a stage now, rather than just a body of water. Is there anything else that this space can reveal in comparison to a static space? So this idea that we are now in a moving body rather than a body that is standing still.
그러니까 한강의 기적이라는 말처럼 뭔가 무브먼트 빠른 그러니까 이동 속에서 우리가 볼 수 있는 것들도 있지만 또 그 움직임 때문에 사라지는 것도 있는 거거든요.
So when we think about Han River and the movement it belongs to the river itself, we see that everything is moving, but then as we're moving forward, there are some things that are left behind, while there are some things that are still remaining on your vision.
그래서 한강은 저에게 어머니의 자궁과 같은 그런 상징적 의미도 있었지만 또 거기서 그 우리가 잃어버린 감각, 우리가 자궁 속에 있었던 태아의 기억을 하는 건 아니잖아요. 그 감각을 한번 다시 생각해보고 싶었던 것 같아요.
So to the author, this is a very metaphorical meaning where Han River comes to her like in remembrance of a mother's womb, because this is a moment for us to also think about the senses that has been lost before or forgotten that we raise from the old past of being in a mother's womb. So this is a representative metaphor of how Han River also becomes some kind of memory attached womb, kind of, yes.
You bring up senses, and I think Wael with Barzakh specifically, the transportation of it now to a public space here in Abu Dhabi, people start to experience it differently. So I'm curious why it was positioned by water, if you have any insight into the decision there.
Yes, of course. I mean, Barzakh is prototype 2 for me. You know, prototype 1 was wetland, which I presented at the Venice Biennale, and is a continuation of my research somehow, and trying to reimagine spaces specifically in the Gulf and Abu Dhabi itself. So it's very site-specific in that sense. So the relationship to water, Barzakh by itself in English means estuary. Yeah? So estuary is a very unique microclimate that's created by the meeting point of river and sea. And in this microclimate, it's where marine life and ecosystems flourish. So, and why do I talk about that? I talk about that because I think water is the essence of life, yeah? And especially here in the Gulf, one of a very arid climate and lack of water, water becomes life. It's not something that I need, it's something that is absolutely necessary, yeah? And then that relates to me as a practicing architect too, because as a practicing architect, I know today we have multiple crises. One crisis is the climate crisis. We also have the cultural and identity crisis of architecture, right? So where architecture, because of the 20th century standardization, etc., all starts to look the same. And then we panic, like, okay, how can I make this look Abu Dhabi? I put a couple of stickers of some geometric patterns and say, oh, this is local. But that's pastiche. I mean, this is just decorative. So I try to go to the essence of things, yeah, in that sense. So water in a place where there's no water becomes key to think about, and especially when you want to build and you need material to build with. And in the past, architecture here was produced by corals and salt, and the salt came from the sea, and the corals came from the sea. So there was always this relationship to water, but not fresh water, but seawater. But today we can't extract from the sea. We cannot harm our ecosystem. But what we do in the UAE is we desalinate. We're the third largest desalinator in the world. So we produce every day the equivalent of 4,800 Olympic-sized pools of salt that we put back into the sea, right? And what happens when you put it back? You create a battery. Salt plus water equals battery. You trap energy. That energy kills the marine ecosystem, kills the corals, and you have a vicious cycle. But you need to desalinate. So it's not wrong. So, I started thinking, okay, what if we take that salt and we start to use that as a building material? And in wetland, we presented that in terms of a cementitious material. In Barzakh, it's a brine mixed with recycled HDPE with palm fiber. So again, using local material, moving away from the modern standardized materials, so that by itself, it reflects our culture. It doesn't need, you don't need to add a sticker to it to say this is local, vernacular, or whatever. By itself, it speaks of the local context.
I mean, also you bringing up this perspective on climate and our response to climate. In your article, you also talk about rain. So that as another format of water that we deal with here a lot, whether it is the lack thereof or the excess of occasionally. And you describe it as both a gift and a warning. And I think this duality is very interesting. So I'm curious, what does this reveal about how architecture must now negotiate climate, not just as physical, but also psychological? And how does this extend beyond a gift and a warning?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this for hours. I'll try to keep it concise. But, again, water, the first city, Uruk, was built on water. Yeah, water is divine. You find water. Christians baptize using water. We do ablution before we pray using water. The Ganges River, water. Water has always been something sacred. It's very important in our life, yeah? And then the hydrological cycle is what keeps the planet between -15 and +15. Yeah? It's a natural ecosystem. Today, we've started engineering the natural ecosystem. We cloud seed. So what does that mean? Yeah? We're going into unknown, uncharted territory. Yeah? We need rain. I mean, as a kid, you wait for rain, you run outside. It's something you admire, yeah? In Sharjah, you have a rain room, you go to experience rain. But today, when rain comes, it's anxiety to us in the Gulf, yeah? It means flooding, stay inside, there's no schools, etc. The problem, our infrastructure and the land, the geography is not designed to absorb the rainfall that is coming today. Because of the excessive heat, you have a very hard surface, etc. So, yeah, we pray for rain, but when it comes, we're not happy with it. So there's this tension in today how we look at water again. So it's very important that we start to question these things and think about them, and I reflect them in my work, not just through they really become part of my work. Barzakh, it allows me to talk about this and think about it and see how can we how can we work with the planet, not against the planet, and that's very important.
Minouk, this idea of gift versus warning, or gift and warning, is that something that you would associate with the psychology of Han River, touching on its rapid development? Because I think that symbolically might be some similarity here.
근데 이제 그 한강에서 그 퍼포먼스를 할 때에는 이제 한강 르네상스 프로젝트라고 해서 그 당시 지금 현재 시정인 오세훈 시장께서 그런 프로젝트를 이제 추진하고 있었거든요.
So when we think about the things that you were asking so far, so when we think about this, this is a very familiar project we have in Korea as well, called Renaissance Project, also led by the mayor of Seoul, Oh Se-hun. So this is something that it was familiar for her.
그리고 그 당시 또 4대강 프로젝트라고 해서 Four Big River Project 그게 이제 카날 프로젝트였어요. 그래서 운하를 만들어서 그 부산부터 중국까지 운하를 통해서 이동한다. Canal.
So during this project back then, there has been 4 big river project where the canal has been connected from Busan all the way to the edge,
making a new highway.
until 중국까지.
근데 작가로서 그런 어떤 자연을 바라볼 때 좀 더 우리가 그 자연의 일부라는 것을 우리가 잃고 있는 것은 아닌가? 그 부분을 좀 더 우리가 이야기하는 게 작가가 하는 일이 아닌가? 그런 생각으로 시작을 했던 것 같아요.
And as an artist, she thought that her role here is to talk about the stories that think about if we're part of the nature, is there something that's missing as we think about ourselves within that nature part.
근데 그게 이제 좀 더 우리의 bright future를 위한 것이었다면 그런 모든 공동의 프로젝트가 저는 좀 더 그 물의 subversive한 그런 관계에서 이런 개발의 관점을 이야기해보고 싶었던 거죠.
So if it was really meant for the broad future, then she is questioning if this whole project regarding water is for the better good.
subversive matter. 그래서 그리고 물이라는 거는 우리에게는 좀 더 어떤 정신적인 것 그리고 또 회복력에 관한 것이고 또 지속 가능한 것에 대한 이야기이기 때문에 그런 삶이 어둠 속에서도 지속되고 있듯이 그런 이야기를 큐레이션하고 그것을 다시 관점을 이동시켜서 보여주는 것 그게 이제 물과 같은 역할이라고 생각을 했던 것 같아요.
So the role of water is very psychological in a way because when we think about it, it actually metaphorically represents about adaptability as well as resilience as we shift perspectives of understanding the topic.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what I take away from this is this motif of bright future. Bright future is also something we'd associate a lot with the Gulf, at least, or a lot of the projects here in the Gulf. I want to ask you, Wael, if this motif of a bright future of these abandoned projects or these speculative projects, these latent conditions, what do you think they reveal about power or planning or cultural ambition here in the Gulf? Just expanding on this bright.
I think the Gulf, to me, is an excellent experimental ground for really climate resilient futures. Yeah, the Western world is saturated. Yeah, here we're building, we're expanding, we're creating new infrastructures, we're redefining things, and the way we do it is very important today. I think, yes, at the beginning it came with speed, it came with maybe adopting Western typologies, but I think now it's time that we shift and we really become the innovators of the future, and we really think about how can we reimagine the future as a circular context, not a linear extractive mindset. That's the mindset of the 20th century. It's a mindset that has brought us to catastrophe today. But the only way out is through innovation and through proactiveness. And this is what we have here. We're proactive. We're not here thinking, oh, we're in trouble. No, we're here thinking, okay, how can we redefine this? We love the challenge.
Yeah. I think both of you touch on speed, and your work looks at speed with light and through sound as well, through movement in the film itself. And you can see time here collapsing, past and future, just collapsing on itself. And then Wael, you on the other hand, I think you take a more slow meditative look on trying to digest this process that we have, these materials we have, and trying to really slowly think about time. So I want to ask a very open-ended question to the both of you about time, and what does it mean to build with time rather than building against time. Minouk, if you would like to go ahead first.
그 외국인이 한국에 왔을 때 가장 먼저 배우는 말이 빨리빨리래요.
So when foreigners first come to Korea, the first term they learn is 빨리빨리,
한국
which means faster, faster.
한국은 진짜 모든 게 빨라요.
And in Korea, we tend to regard everything very fast, rapid, and quick.
그래서 되게 좋은 점도 있지만 나쁜 점도 보이기 시작한 것 같아요.
So because of that, sometimes it's good, but at the same time, there are negative things that come along with the line.
그래서 제가 걱정하는 거는 빨리빨리는 좋은데 우리가 빨리빨리 어디로 가고 있느냐의 문제인 것 같아요.
So the artist says that, of course, she understands the whole concept of 빨리빨리, but then at the same time, we question, so how do we go from here? Which direction should we take in regards to this whole concept of 빨리빨리ness?
그래서 그 속도의 문제는 제 작업에서 굉장히 중요한 문제의식을 일으키는 부분이고요.
So speed is definitely one of the critical points that has been discussed throughout many of her works.
그리고 제가 거기서 이야기하고 싶은 거는 결국 그 빨리빨리에서 우리가 상실하고 있는 것, 그리고 그 상실로부터 다시 돌봐야 하는 게 무엇인지 그 부분을 이야기하고 싶은 것 같아요.
And within this whole concept of being fast and rapid, here she also questions about what is going to be vanished and missing through this way of progression, as well as what are the aspects that we have to take care of.
Time is the fourth dimension, yeah, I think, and architecture is not static. Architecture is about time. Time is a phenomenon, I see it, just equal to light or wind. It's something that's constantly moving. Now, if it moves fast, it moves slow, it's not something I have control over, right? It's a measured, we measure time because we decided to measure it in that sense, yeah? But to me, time is about the seasons. For example, in architecture, it's about summer, spring. How does that reflect in my space, in the production of architecture and space? And that's key. So time is read through the movement of light and shadow and wind and all of that in creating the architecture by itself. So this is how I perceive and view time.
I think here we can start to see architecture as an activity in interactions, the architecture of interaction, especially with time passing and people passing each other, cities growing and expanding. I want to first touch on your audience, Minouk. They become a part of the performance. They become this swallowed audience. How and why do you think the public's complicity, their confusion, or their presence in that time, in your work, how do you think that is relevant? Why do you think it is important? And what role does this audience play here in this spatial space?
작가에게는 어쨌건 재현의 문제가 있어요.
So for any artist, we have a concern about skills and abilities.
그리고 관점의 이동의 문제가 있어요.
And there's also some concerns about the movement of perspectives.
그러니까 이런 장르적 실험을 통해서 제가 하고 싶었던 거는 관점의 이동, 그러니까 관객과 무대의 관점의 이동.
So through this whole project, she is focused more on the genre-based experiment, where she's studying the relationship between the audience as well as her work as an artist.
그리고 이런 관점의 이동을 통해서 어떤 우리가 보여줄 수 없었던, represent 할 수 없었던 감각, 감수성을 불러일으키는 문제가 있습니다.
And regarding this matter, she studies more of the movement of perspective of those that has been unrepresented or those that has been invisible throughout.
With movement, again, to you, Wael, how does one design or choreograph presence then in a space? What is things that you think about when it comes to participation, slowness, tactility? How do you ask people to dwell, to pause, to interact in space?
I think, if I think of myself as an architect who can control people, then that's a problem, Architecture, again, I go back to the definition, coup. It's creating a space of possibilities. It's creating a platform that allows people to appropriate it in the way they would like to appropriate it. Yeah, especially public space. And I would hate to think of myself that I have the power to choreograph movement in architecture. So I'm not that powerful. And I would hope architects don't see themselves as such figures, yeah? So it's very important to create space that's open to adaptation, appropriation, whatever. In Barzakh, on the Corniche, what I created, you see kids there eating ice cream under the shade. Sometimes the cats linger there. Some youth sit there. They have talks. Sorry, I'll get there. A lot of different photos. So I think it's very important that we create spaces that are more. Sorry, I was going through everything. That are more flexible. Yeah, very flexible, very inviting, and that is key. And what I can control, again, is light, shadow, wind. These are things that I can control as an architect, but not people.
This swallowing of audience is a very interesting idea that I can see with the both of you. And I'm also very curious about, beyond what we can see, what are some systems that you think we typically don't look at, or systems that are invisible when we think about space, when we think about the city, whether these systems are emotional, material, spatial? What do you wish more people could see beyond, performances that you're showing them or sites that you're building? For either of you, if you'd like to answer.
현대 미술은 감정을 굉장히 검열하고 배제해 왔어요.
So throughout, contemporary art has been excluding emotional aspects.
그런데 오늘날 미디어의 발전과 더불어서 우리에게 지금 가장 큰 위협으로 다가오고 있는 것 중에 하나가 감정의 문제인 것 같아요.
And a critical voice rises at this time where emotional aspect comes to a significance, also considering with the rise of media today.
그리고 저는 아시다시피 한국은 아직 전쟁 중이고 분단의 국가예요. 분단된 국가예요.
So as you may know, Korea is a
Divided.
divided nation where we're technically still at war at the moment.
그래서 우리는 이데올로기에 많이 좌우되고 이분법적으로 사고할 수 있는 위험에 더 많이 놓여 있어요.
So we are at the same time put at a risk where we may fall into this ideology of having binary thinking.
그리고 아까도 말씀드렸듯이 미디어가 더 빨리 정보를 전달하고 발전을 했는데 우리는 오히려 더 혐오의 감정과 더 많은 가짜 뉴스에 놓여 있어요. 네, 노출돼 있어요.
So as you may have already mentioned, that we understand while media does a really good job in rapidly delivering certain information, at the same time they may also raise some emotional such as hatred or even fake news, and these are some aspects that she is concerned about as an artist.
그래서 제가 저의 과제로 삼고 있는 것은 그런 감정의 이분법적 그 위험에서 어떻게 다이버시티에 대해 생각하고 또 그것이 또 가져올 수 있는 추상화는 또 어떤 위험을 가져올 수 있는지 그런 부분을 생각하고 있습니다.
So over her work is fighting against the risk of such binary emotions, and at the same time she's also thinking about what other risks it may bring, as well as the diversity that she can possibly think of.
Well, what about yourself? Do you think there are any invisible systems that require us to give more attention?
Yeah, I think, we need to see our context. We need to reconnect with our planet. I think at this moment we're very disconnected, yeah? Even the things, the nature that is there, how connected are we to it? And that is something that is important today, is that how, when we design our cities or we talk about our cities or we walk through our cities, we connect to that landscape that we have here today. The UAE is home to the largest, most intact salt flat in the world, Sabha. These salt flats absorb more CO2, 1 square meter, than 1 square meter of rainforest. We have magnificent landscapes that we don't know much about. We need to go and investigate them, understand them, and make them part of our life, and not fight them, and try to, just build new developments in areas that should be protected, let's say. And it's very important that we understand our context and we reconnect with it. And that's the way for the future.
I think I'll share one last question for you guys. When we think about the future, we think about connecting, and we try to separate from these ideas of binaries, especially when we think about space and when we think about our mediums. The two of you here are artists and architects, but also sometimes Wael, you can be an artist, and I assume, Minouk, you're an architect of space and people. Where do you guys feel that there are moments of dependencies between artists and architects that can really push this conversation further? Where can we really investigate space together to start thinking about more inclusive urban futures? And where can we find those instances of architects and artists working with one another?
사실 어떻게 보면 작가들은 굉장히 추상적으로 생각하고 또 상징이나 기호 이런 재현의 도구들을 가지고 작업을 하는 데 비해서 건축가들은 정말 우리 일상의 삶과 직접적으로 관계를 맺고 있기 때문에 훨씬 더 실천적인 부분에서 인게이지하고 있다고 생각을 해요.
So many artists tend to have more of an abstract thinking as well as finding the ways to present certain things with the use of tools or items, while at the other hand, architectures do the same work, but then they actually have a direct relationship with the daily lives that we live in such of having more practical applications to our daily lives.
그런데 항상 지금 한국에서도 이렇게 압축적인 그런 경제 성장과 더불어서 우리가 보게 된 것은 그런 어떤 로컬한 것과 글로벌의 관계에서 많이 기울어진 운동장 얘기 우리가 했는데 우리가 케어할 수 없었던 부분들이 많았던 것 같아요.
So within the Korea's current compressed economic development, we have been seeing a lot of local global relationship, and you can think about it such as like a tilted field or land where we can sometimes see those aspects that are uncared of.
그러니까 한국은 전쟁을 겪은 나라고 정말 ruin, nothing 그 폐허에서 시작했다고 볼 수 있는데 지금 오늘날 만약에 어떤 그런 건축가와 예술가의 역할 이런 것을 물어보신다고 하면 좀 더 그런 로컬과 글로벌의 관계, 유니버설하고 코스모스의 그 잃어버린 이야기들을 어떻게 연결시킬 수 있을지 건축가의 그런 어떤 구체적 실천들과 를 만날 때만 그것이 어떤 우리가 꿈을 꿀 수 있는 것이 되지 않나 그런 생각을 합니다.
So Korea's land after the war started from ruins, started from the emptiness, but then with the support of the combination between artists and architects, there has been a lot of modern and cosmopolitan initiatives as well as movements that has kind of raised these things up more into the growth within the country.
Well, what about yourself?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what Minouk mentioned is that I think as architects and artists, you know, we're like maestro of an orchestra. Yeah, we have the ability to bring together multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary teams to work with one another. And, you know, maybe civil engineers don't have that ability, but we have that ability by I think, our training and the way we think. And that's an asset that we should take advantage of because we, you know, we can rethink and reimagine from the common something new that takes us out from any crisis or any challenge that we have to face.
Thank you both for sharing your perspectives. Thank you for talking with me and for exploring these ideas of space as medium in this conversation. I want to, before we wrap things up, open it up to the audience. If the audience has any questions, any remarks and comments that they would like to share with our two panelists.
I'm sorry. Hello, I'm very happy to be here with you guys. Thank you very much for this lovely conversation. And I'm an architect myself. And when you talk about the space, I cannot agree more with the differences in between that we have west, east. However, I think when I talk about the water and the air, those are kind of elements that they have no frontiers, no barriers, unless eventually you can like enclose them in certain areas so eventually you can see it. I think the water is more like I say, it's easier to understand rather than the air. I love the idea when you say that space is an area or space is a medium, as the theme of the talk, the panel, that things happen. That gives the imagination to flow. That an architect or an engineer or even an artist is not the agent that controls the behavior. The entity, the medium, is free to explore. that is the best of the best. And again, when we say Ali, that here in the Gulf, we are ahead in so many aspects to give an answer for any architecture issue or problem, or because the West is already set down on their own premises. Here we have a novelty to explore, and it's so rich, this area. And we do have to look after nature. That's, I think, nature, we call it Mother Nature eventually. And I come from Barcelona. We have one of our well-known architects, Antonio Gaudí. He spent his whole life studying nature. All the structure, not only decoration, but the engineering aspects of the nature gives us, I think, most of our solutions for our problems. Everything is already given. We don't need to create from abstract. I think that nature is our major source of inspiration. And I do fight with people here when they say that the desert is empty. That's a huge mistake. The desert is very rich. Thank you.
Totally agree.
This one's for about the adoptive dissensus. I want to ask, there's an audio playing of a political prisoner. I think his name is Kang Yong-ju. I wanted to ask, to me, like his audio seemed like a big part of the work. Is that where you got the title from? And also, was this some sort of speech that he was doing earlier, or did you approach him specifically for this work, for this piece?
그러니까 저는 작업할 때 저의 굉장히 개인적인 경험하고 그리고 알려져 있는 역사를 연결하는 거를 해온 것 같아요.
When she's working on her artworks, she mainly connects between her personalized experience as well as the history that is known of.
그런데 거기에서는 우연성도 많이 작용하고요, contingency. 그리고 제가 뭐랄까 이해할 수 없는 것이 주로 작업의 어떤 출발점으로 들어오게 되는 것 같아요.
So from there could be a lot of contingency during the work progress, but at the same time, there are some aspects that are sometimes understood of, and that is the whole starting point of where her artwork is motivated by.
And then I have met Kang Yong-ju, and I was very angry because I couldn't understand why he didn't deny. For example, he was wrongly accused as a North Korean spy, and then he said he was during the torture he was asked to say yes, I am a North Korean spy, but he said no, there are no choice. The truth is one. I'm not a North Korean spy. So he had to spend his 17 years in jail. So I heard his story and I was very angry, and then it was kind of a starting point. But then as I said, the Han rivers as a metaphor of psychological dimension. So I decided to include his story as part of this changing the point of view of a stage and audience and performance point of view.
Thank you, Ariane.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you very much. It's just a comment. I believe in the power of the arts and architecture to drive us people to new places or to places that exist that we don't know of. We discover them with you, and we appreciate the beauty of the art, the beauty of the architecture, and the beauty of the space. That's incredible. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Hello, first of all, it was a very insightful discussion. I wanted to ask about how humans tend to be anthropocentric. We have this arrogance of space that we create. Would you think there's a possibility to have a neutrality between the dominance of human and the dominance of nature as an artist or as an architect? Or as both, of course?
Yeah, I mean, pre-industrialization or pre the 20th century, we lived with nature. Yeah, we were in harmony with nature. It's just the 20th century that changed our relationship, yeah, from nurturing our land to extracting. Yeah, we went into a new mode of thinking. We consume and we throw. We consume and we throw. And this is what I'm trying to advocate for today, is that we throw away the 20th century, go back to our heritage, reconnect with our roots, because our roots were not like that, and then reimagine the future based on this connection that or inspiration we bring back from our ancestors. They knew better than us.
And for me, again, is the question of translation. Nature, space, site, places, all I try to think from starting from zero. And when we are seeing landscape, for example, this is also the one question I have since a long time. What is landscape? And sanshui, for example, mountains and water. And when we have this kind of attitude, appreciation of this landscape, seeing the nature as part of the nature. So. We made this fast economical development, and thanks to this development, we are now we can live together. But in this togetherness, there are something we should rethink and in further what we have lost, what we have ignored. So.
Thank you. One last question, I think, and then we can wrap things up.
Hello, my name is Young-il Kim, Korean dressed like an Emirati. I'm not very, deeply educated in art or architecture, but I'm very curious. Due to the advent of AI, do you think AI will be an enabler for this universe, as in the art and architecture, or do you see it as a competitor? And if it is so, if it touches people's emotions, be it from AI or from a human being, would that have sufficient intrinsic value as art that we can consider as a legacy that is beginning from this century?
Well, in Korea, for example, AI is the most promised thing for the future. We are into this development, new area, new territory. But as an artist, I think it's difficult to say. It's difficult to answer to your question. But what I know is that art trying to see what is uncontrollable, out of control. I think this is what we have as a task. Not always think about the control or the as a plan, but with the presence, with the arrivals of this new technology, I think that we should more think about what is uncertain, what is uncertainty and uncontrollable things. This is, for a moment, I know, and I can say little.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, it just depends how you use it, you're right? I think I see these technologies are things that we should think of as assets, right? They're enablers. They can help us. If we put them into good use, they can help us. I mean, look at when we had COVID, right? We needed to come up with a vaccine so quickly. It's only because of these technologies we came up with a vaccine in a couple of months. Typically, it would take 2 years. So the supercomputer played to our advantage. So I don't like to think of them as negative things that will come and take over the planet. That's not true. I mean, when they said the World Wide Web was coming and that's going to redefine humankind, it didn't. I mean, we used it as a tool. It'll be the same, I believe. A tool that we can use to our advantage.
Thank you both so much. I think me personally, I'm leaving this with a lot of reflections on my preconceived notions of space, of time, to care or to caress time slowly and more intentionally. Thank you again. I just want to remind everyone that the exhibition will be on for another week. June 30th will be the closing date. Minouk's film is right over here, a 3-channel video. And then inshallah we can also see Minouk in the Guggenheim when that opens. And for Wael, his space in Mina Zayed, right way with gallery. And your sunglasses that people can produce from wasted material. I would encourage visiting Wael in his studio space. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, ADMAF, for bringing this amazing exhibition. And thank you to the Seoul Museum of Art and the Korean Cultural Center here in the UAE. Thank you to our audience. And I will leave it at that. Thank you all.